They told her it was a rest trip. Her son Warren carried her bag to the door of Union Station, set it down on the tile floor, and said he would be back in 5 minutes. He kissed her cheek. He did not look her in the eye. She watched the rear lights of his car disappear through the glass doors. She did not call after him. She did not reach for her phone. She sat down on the long wooden bench, straightened her back, and placed her hand flat against the left side of her chest. Beneath the wool of her navy coat, beneath the lining she had stitched, closed herself on a quiet Tuesday morning 3 years ago, was an envelope. She did not take it out. She only touched it. The way you touch something you have carried a long time and do not need to look at anymore to know it is still there. Her name was Miriam Calloway. She was 76 years old. She had spent 38 years reading contracts for a living, and she had spent the last 3 years reading her son. Across town in a law office on 5th and Clement Warren Calloway stood at a conference table with a folder in his hands and watched the color leave his own face. Warren. They are all signed. Every single one. My mother signed everything. The attorney did not raise her voice. Attorney, not everything, Mr. Calloway. The termination of life estate is missing. Without it, I cannot transfer title. No one can. Warren, then where is it? She did not answer. There was nothing to answer. Cut to the bench at Union Station, a November afternoon. A woman in a navy coat, her hand resting quietly against her chest. It was still there. It had always been there. She had made sure of that. She had known it was Tuesday before Warren said a word. 8 days earlier, she had heard Petra's voice through the gap in the kitchen door, low, and certain the buyer needs to close before the 10th Warren, your mother needs to be gone before that. They did not know she could hear, or they had stopped caring whether she could. Miriam had walked back to her room, opened her small pocket calendar, and written a single line on the page for Tuesday. Then she had closed it and put it in her drawer and gone to bed. That Tuesday morning she reached for the navy coat first. She had lived in the Calloway house for 41 years. The staircase had 14 steps, and she had counted them every morning for so long that her feet knew the number before her mind did. The apple tree in the back garden was Howard's, planted in the spring of 1989, when Warren was 15 and still believed his father could do anything. The small burn mark on the kitchen counter near the window had been there since Christmas of 1998. When a candle tipped and Howard grabbed it barehanded and laughed about it for 10 years afterward. Miriam walked through each room that morning the way you walk through something you are putting into memory. Slowly, without rushing. The way you look at a face you love before a long goodbye. Warren and Petra arrived at 10. Petra's voice was half a note higher than usual, bright and busy, in the way that people get when they are trying not to think about what they are doing. Miriam, I already called ahead. Sunset Meadows has a lovely garden, and they do an embroidery class on Fridays. You are going to have such a good rest. Warren set a travel bag on the kitchen floor. It was thin canvas, the kind sold at the dollar store, in a bin near the entrance. Not the kind anyone brings on a trip they intend to come back from. Miriam looked at it. Then she looked at her son. Let me get my coat, she said. In the bedroom, she stood before the mirror one last time. The navy wool was heavy on her shoulders, the way it always was, the way she had come to find steady rather than burdensome. Howard had bought it for their 37th anniversary, October 2010, 1 year before he sat down with his attorney and drew up the life estate deed that would make what came next impossible for Warren to finish. She had not known that when she received the coat. She knew it now, and it made her hold the lapels a moment longer than usual. Beneath the lining where she had sewn the seam closed herself on a quiet Tuesday 3 years ago, the envelope was there. She did not reach inside. She did not need to. She had checked it every morning for 3 years the way you check that the door is locked before you sleep, not because you doubt it, but because the act of checking is itself a form of knowing. She pressed her palm flat against the wool once lightly, and that was enough. She opened the nightstand drawer, took out the pocket calendar, uncapped the pen she kept beside it, and wrote in her small, even hand, Warren took me today. 10:15 in the morning, navy coat. She capped the pen, placed the calendar into the inside pocket of the coat beside the envelope. Then she went downstairs and counted all 14 steps. The drive was 45 minutes. Warren and Petra talked to each other across the front seats about a trip they were planning and the new kitchen fixtures Petra had chosen and the traffic on Route 40. Miriam sat in the back and watched Ohio pass through the window. The maples were turning. Some of them had gone nearly red. She thought about Howard, who had loved October above all other months. She thought about Delia Park, who had said to her 18 months ago across a desk covered in documents, "They are missing something fundamental, and they do not know it exists." She thought about the first page of the pocket calendar 3 years back. The first line she had written in it, "Warren brought papers today. Bring to Delia in the morning." She had brought them in the morning. At Union Station, Warren pulled to the curb and carried her bag to the entrance. He set it on the tile and checked his watch. "Just wait right here, Mom. I am going to get your ticket. 5 minutes." He did not look at her eyes when he said it. Petra did not get out of the car. Miriam watched her son walk back into the station. She found the long wooden bench near the window and sat down, straightening her back the way her mother had taught her before her mother had taught her anything else. She folded her hands in her lap. At 12 minutes she knew the car was gone without looking. At 20 minutes she did not reach for her phone. She sat with her hands folded and the coat warm around her and the envelope exactly where it had always been. And she thought in the particular quiet way of someone who has been waiting a very long time for something that has finally arrived. All right then. It begins now. She had counted the stairs that morning. She had written it down. She had said goodbye to the burn mark on the counter and the apple tree in the back, and the 14 steps she would not count again for a while. She had done all of it with the same calm attention she had once given to 38 years of contracts, because she had learned long ago that the most important documents are the ones no one else knows to look for. She was not surprised. She had not been surprised in 3 years. The only question now was how long it would take them to call. If stories like this matter to you, stories about quiet people who were dismissed but never truly defeated, this channel was made for you. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Union Station was not the kind of place people chose. It was the kind of place people passed through on their way to somewhere else, and everything about it reflected that understanding. The floor was clean but not polished. The benches were wood worn smooth at the edges by decades of waiting. The light came through tall windows at an angle that made the afternoon feel later than it was. Nobody decorated for November here. November simply arrived, and the station allowed it. Miriam sat near the window with her bag at her feet and her coat buttoned to the top. She did not open her phone. She did not watch the door. She watched the light change across the parking lot outside, the way the shadows of the lamp posts stretched longer as the afternoon moved, and she waited the way she had learned to wait in the last 3 years, which was without expecting anything to be different than it was. 2 seats down, a man in a gray jacket folded open a newspaper with the practiced ease of someone who had done it in the same chair many times before. He was around 70 broad through the shoulders, the kind of retired that looks permanent and comfortable. He did not acknowledge her. She did not acknowledge him. At a bus station, that is simply courtesy. 40 minutes passed. Miriam unzipped the travel bag Warren had carried for her. She had not looked inside it before now. She looked inside it now. 3 sets of clothes, all of them from the back of her closet, the ones she had been meaning to bring to Goodwill. A pair of house slippers, a bottle of her blood pressure medication, the Tuesday through Thursday doses already pushed out of the blister pack. No charging cable, no extra cash, no address book. She looked at the contents for a long moment, the way she had once looked at a contract clause that confirmed what she had already suspected. Then she zipped the bag closed. All right, she thought. The second time she had thought it today. The man with the newspaper lowered it. Colder than they said it would be, he offered. That is true, Miriam said. You waiting on a bus somewhere? She considered that for a moment. I have not decided yet, she said. He looked at her, not the way people look when they are cataloging something strange, but the way people look when they have been around long enough to know that some answers are the truest answers available, even when they do not fit the question. I understand, he said, and raised the newspaper again. His name, she would learn later, was Gordon. He had worked for the railroad for 22 years and had come to this bench every Wednesday afternoon since his first week of retirement, because habits are harder to break than people expect, and because the coffee machine near the south entrance made a passable cup at a price that had not changed since 2009. He did not volunteer any of this. She did not ask. They simply occupied the same bench the way two people can occupy the same bench when neither of them needs anything from the other. She took out her phone. 23%. Petra had kept her from the charger all morning. Small obstacles, the bag needs to go in the car. Warren is waiting. We are going to be late, each one arriving just before Miriam could reach the outlet by her bed. Miriam had noticed and had said nothing. 23% was enough. She had calculated what she needed it for, and 23% was enough for that. There were no messages from Warren, no messages from Petra. She opened her contacts and scrolled until she found Delia Park. The number was there where it had been for 18 months. Delia was waiting for a signal, had been waiting for months, had said, "Only when you are ready, you call me, and we finish this the right way." Miriam looked at the name on the screen for a moment. Then she turned the screen off and put the phone back in her pocket. "Not yet." Gordon folded his newspaper under his arm and stood up, walked to the vending machine near the south wall, and came back with 2 cups of coffee in thin paper cups that steamed in the cold air of the station. He set one on the bench beside her bag, not in her hand, just near enough that she could take it or leave it as she chose. She looked at the cup, then at him. "Thank you," she said. "Station coffee is not good," he said, settling back into his seat. "But it is warm." "That is enough," Miriam said. They drank in the particular silence that belongs to people who have lived long enough to stop being uncomfortable with quiet. Outside, the Ohio sky was moving toward gray, the way it does in November, as though it has made a decision and is simply following through. After a while, Gordon said, "Who are you waiting for?" Miriam said for the phone to ring. He looked at her again with that same unhurried consideration. He understood she could see that this was not an answer in the literal sense, and also that it was the most honest answer she had. "You need to use a phone. Mine is full battery." "Not yet," Miriam said. "But may I ask you when I do?" "You go right ahead," Gordon said, and put the paper back up. They sat while Ohio darkened around them. At 5:47 in the evening, 3 hours and 12 minutes after Warren had set her bag on the tile and walked away without looking back, Miriam felt her phone vibrate against her ribs. She took it out. The screen said Warren. She watched it ring. Once, twice, a third time, a fourth, a fifth. On the 6th ring, the call moved to voicemail and the screen went dark. She set the phone on her knee the way she had once set a completed audit on her desk at the end of a long Friday. Not with relief, not with anger, with the quiet confirmation of someone who has run the numbers and found them exactly as expected. Now he knows, she thought. Not that she was angry, not that she was hurt. He knew now that the papers were not complete, that the sale could not close, that somewhere between the buyer and the title and the $3.2 million he had already spent 3 times in his imagination, there was a document he did not have and did not know how to find. He did not know where it was. She did. She placed her hand flat against the left side of her coat and sat quietly in the last of the light, a woman who had kept her own accounts for 76 years and had not once let a final number surprise her. She did not sleep on the bench. Around 7 in the evening, Gordon stood up, tucked his newspaper under his arm, and wrote a phone number on the back of a coffee receipt he pulled from his jacket pocket. "My daughter," he said, setting it on the bench beside her. "In case you need someone to call who is not busy." Miriam looked at the number, then at him. He nodded once the way men of his generation nod when they mean something they are not going to say out loud, and walked out through the glass doors into the Ohio dark. She sat alone. After a while, she reached into the inside pocket of her coat and took out the small calendar. It fit in one hand the way it always had. The cover was worn at the corners from 3 years of the same pocket. She opened it to the first page and began to read, not to remember, but to confirm. The way you run a final check on numbers you already know are right. The first entry was 18 months ago, to the week. Warren came today with papers. He He sat at the kitchen table and explained about simplifying the estate, his voice level and reasonable, his eyes moving around the room, the way eyes move when they are avoiding something they do not want to find. Bequeath everything smoothly, Mom, no probate, no delays, just cleaner for everyone. She had listened. She had nodded. She had signed where he pointed because he was her son, and she had not yet decided what she knew. Then she had gone to her room and made a copy of every page he had left her. The next morning she called Delia Park. She had known Delia through Howard. Howard had known Delia the way you know a person who refuses to take your money when you cannot afford it and calls it simply the right thing to do. When Howard was sick in 2016 and the bills were arriving and Delia had quietly reduced her rate without being asked, and without mentioning it, Howard had said afterward that woman has her accounts in order in a way that has nothing to do with money. When Miriam called the morning after Warren's first visit, Delia had not asked many questions. "Bring me everything," she said. "I will look it over and call you back." 3 days later, Delia called. "Mrs. Calloway, she said nothing here is legally wrong yet, but they are building towards something. And there is a document they are not aware of." Miriam sat in the chair by her bedroom window and listened while Delia explained the life estate deed. Howard had drawn it up in the fall of 2011. She remembered the afternoon, though she had not thought of it in years. Their neighbor Walter Pressman had lost his house that summer to a dispute among his children after his wife passed a house he had lived in for 30 years, and Howard had come home from Walter's farewell dinner quiet, in a way that lasted 3 days. Then he had called Delia and asked her to come to the house on a Saturday. "I want to make sure that whatever happens," Howard had said, sitting at the same kitchen table where Warren would later spread his own papers, "this house is yours as long as you want it. No one can take it. No one can sell it. Not without you." Delia had drawn up the document, registered it with the county, and handed the original to Miriam in a plain envelope. Miriam had put it in the fireproof box on the top shelf of the closet and had not thought about it again for 12 years because there was no reason to think about it. Howard was alive. The house was theirs. Some things you put away because you hope you will never need them. In Delia's office, listening to Delia explain what a life estate deed meant and what a termination of life estate required, and why Warren's entire arrangement of paperwork could not close a sale without one. Miriam sat in the good chair across from the desk and said nothing for 2 full minutes. "Then Warren does not know this document exists." "Delia, no. It does not appear in any records he would have access to." A silence. "What would you like to do?" Delia asked. "Miriam, I want to keep it and see how far he intends to go." Delia had looked at her steadily. "You understand that means watching things get worse instead of stopping them now." "I know," Miriam said. "I want to see how far." Delia had heard her say something like that once before years ago about a different matter. She recognized it for what it was. Not stubbornness, not strategy in the cold sense. A particular kind of patience that belongs to people who have learned that the full shape of a thing only reveals itself if you let it finish. She had let it finish. The calendar recorded the next 18 months in short, even lines. Warren brought new papers in October, a deferral form in January, a notarized summary the following March. Each time Delia reviewed the copies Miriam brought her. Each time the same conclusion, thorough, careful, and missing the one thing that made all of it useless. The stack on Delia's desk grew. The gap at the center of it stayed exactly the same size. 20 months ago, Miriam had heard Petra's voice through the kitchen door saying they had a buyer. That evening, she had gone to the fireproof box and taken out the original life estate deed. She had found an envelope the color of old paper, slid the document inside, sealed it, and signed her name across the flap, the way her father had taught her to seal something that matters. Then she had taken her sewing kit from the nightstand drawer and spent 15 minutes stitching the envelope to the lining of the navy coat, working in the small, careful stitches she had learned from her mother in the bedroom of the house Howard had wanted to make sure was hers. She had worn the coat the next day, and every day after that. Now she closed the calendar. 3 years in the palm of one hand. Outside the station windows, Ohio was fully dark, the streetlights laying their long reflections across the glass. She sat with the quiet of a woman who has checked every number and found not one of them wrong. Howard, she thought, you drew up that paper in 2011 because of Walter Pressman and because you loved me and because that was who you were. You did not know it would matter like this. You only knew you wanted the house to be mine. She picked up the phone. 14%. She found Delia's name and pressed call. Delia answered before the second ring. It is time, Delia, Miriam said. Are you safe? I am sitting at the bus station with Howard's coat, Miriam said. A pause, then I am coming to get you. At 6:15 in the evening, while Miriam was reading the first pages of her pocket calendar, under the station lights, Dennis Hoare rang the doorbell of the Calloway house and smiled the way men smile when they are carrying a check. Warren opened the door before the second ring. He had been watching the driveway. Dennis stepped inside with his briefcase and the particular ease of someone who closes deals for a living and has learned that ease itself is part of the close. Warren took his coat. Petra came out of the kitchen and shook his hand and said she had coffee ready. The three of them settled around the kitchen table, the same table where Miriam had eaten breakfast for 41 years, and Dennis opened his briefcase and began laying documents down on the wood in a row, each one aligned to the next, the way you lay out the final pieces of something you have been building for a long time. Warranty deed, he said. There. Disclosure forms? Title insurance application? Transfer affidavit? He moved through the stack with the brisk efficiency of a man who has done this many times and enjoys it every time. Warren watched each page appear with the expression of someone counting down to something good. Then Dennis looked up. And termination of life estate with the signature of Miriam Calloway. He paused. Do we have that one? Warren looked at Petra. Petra looked at the table. Warren said, what is that? Dennis set down his pen. Life estate deed recorded 2011 County Register. Miriam Calloway is listed as the life tenant. That gives her the legal right to occupy and to refuse transfer for the duration of her lifetime. Before we can convey title, she needs to sign a termination. Without it, I cannot complete the transfer. No title company will insure it, and no court will recognize it. The room was quiet in a way that had not been there a moment before. I was not aware of that document, Warren said, his voice careful in the way voices get careful when they are buying time. Dennis looked at him with the mild patience of a man who has learned never to be surprised. Is it possible your mother has it? Warren said, I will reach her right now. He called from the kitchen while Petra stayed at the table with Dennis and made conversation about the market and the neighborhood and how quickly things were moving these days, her voice half a pitch too bright. In the hallway, Warren listened to Miriam's voicemail and said, Mom, call me back. It is important. Call me back as soon as you get this. He came back to the table. She is probably settling in at Sunset Meadows, he said. The reception there is not always reliable. Dennis nodded slowly. When do you think she could sign? Warren. I will have her call you first thing tomorrow. Dennis, I need this resolved before 10 on Friday morning. That is when the deposit agreement expires. If we do not have the termination executed and submitted before then, my client will withdraw, and the deposit returns to them. 320 days of work, he said not unkindly, and looked at his watch. He left at 6:40. Warren called Sunset Meadows at 6:43. The woman who answered had a pleasant voice and the tone of someone trained to manage difficult calls from family members. She listened to his question. She typed something. She listened to a longer version of his question. She typed something else. Then she said, I am sorry, Mr. Calloway. I do not show a Miriam Calloway in our intake for today or this week. She paused. Actually, she said, I do not show a reservation under that name at all. Warren stood in the kitchen holding the phone. Petra had been watching his face. She came around the table slowly. Warren, she said. He was looking at the phone as though a longer look might produce a different answer. Petra put her hand on the counter and said his name again lower. She is not at Sunset Meadows, Petra said. He said, then where is she? I do not know. Petra's voice was measured now, the brightness entirely gone from it. She looked at the table where Dennis Hoare's card sat next to the untouched coffee cups. Warren. She knows about the life estate deed. He looked at her. She has to, Petra said. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. Warren called a third time. The call went immediately to a recording saying the voicemail was full. The phone had died somewhere in the last 20 minutes. He stood in the kitchen of his parents' house and looked at the counter with the burn mark near the window, the one from Christmas 1998, that Howard had always meant to sand down and never did. And he looked at the curtains his mother had sewn herself the spring. They moved in yellow with a narrow stripe, faded now to the color of old paper. And he looked through the window above the sink to the back garden, where the apple tree his father had planted in 1989 stood in the dark with its bare branches, indifferent to the price of the house around it, indifferent to the papers on the table, indifferent to everything that had been decided around it, and because of it, and in spite of it. "Where did I leave her?" he said. The question had no feeling in it. It was not guilt, not yet. It was the voice of a man who has just understood that the one thing he needed was the one thing he walked away from. "Union Station," Petra said quietly. Warren picked up his car keys from the hook by the door. The hook his father had put there in 1984. He had never once thought about that hook before tonight. "Is she still there?" Petra asked. He said nothing. "If she is not." The door opened and closed. The car started in the driveway. The kitchen went quiet. In the back garden, the apple tree stood where it had always stood in the dark, where Howard had put it 37 years ago, knowing nothing about deposit agreements or title insurance or the particular sound a door makes when someone leaves in a hurry and does not say goodbye. Warren had left his mother at the station at 1:13 in the afternoon. It was now 7:09 in the evening. He was driving back not because he had realized he was wrong, but because he had realized he needed something she still had. Miriam had known he would come back. She had simply not known how many hours it would take for a $3.2 million sale to show him the shape of what he had forgotten. "Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Has someone you loved ever underestimated you and later realized how wrong they were? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one." The sedan was dark green, the kind of car that belongs to someone who chose it once and saw no reason to change. It pulled to the curb in front of Union Station at 8:12 in the evening, and Delia Park stepped out before the engine had fully stopped, the way she had always moved, with the particular efficiency of someone who has learned over 30 years that time belongs to whoever uses it with intention. She was 61 years old, gray at the temples, and not apologetic about it, wearing a long wool coat and carrying a briefcase that had seen the inside of enough courtrooms and county offices to have earned its own credibility. She walked through the station doors and stopped just inside, let her eyes move across the room once, and found Miriam on the bench near the window, without any difficulty at all. She had always been able to find Miriam in a room. Something about the way the woman sat straight-backed and unhurried, like a person who had decided where to be and was simply being there. "Mrs. Calloway," she said. Miriam looked up. "Delia, thank you for coming." Delia sat down beside her, set the briefcase on the next bench, worked the clasps open, and took out a thin folder. The station was quieter now, the evening crowd thinner, a few travelers sleeping against their bags near the back wall. She spread nothing on the bench between them. She simply held the folder and looked at Miriam, the way she had looked at her across the desk 3 years ago, with the same clear attention she gave every document she believed mattered. "I spoke with the county register on my way here," she said. "Your life estate deed is active and fully on record. Nothing has been filed against it. No one can convey that property without your signature, and they cannot obtain your signature by force or by pressure in any legally defensible way." She paused. "I wanted you to hear it from me out loud tonight." "I know," Miriam said. "I know you know. I wanted you to hear it again." A short silence, the kind they had learned to be comfortable in. "Do you want to come home with me tonight?" Delia asked. "I have a guest room that has not been used since my sister visited in March." Miriam looked at her hands in her lap. "No, I want to stay a little longer." Delia did not push. That was one of the things Miriam had always valued about her. She understood the difference between a decision and an invitation. "He will come here," Miriam said. "You are certain?" "Yes." Dennis Hoare has a deadline on Friday at 10 in the morning. Warren will have called Sunset Meadows by now. He knows I am not there. He will assume I know about the life estate, and he will come back to this station because it is the last place he knows where I was. She said it the way she might have said it about a contract discrepancy, without heat, with precision. He will come. Delia looked at her for a moment. You have been thinking about this for a long time. 3 years, Miriam said. Delia opened the folder. I want to go through your options one more time, not because you do not understand them, but when he arrives, I want you speaking from clarity and not from anything else. She looked up briefly. I know you are not emotional about this anymore. I have not been emotional about it for 2 years, Miriam said. I know. I still want to say it. Miriam said, go ahead. Delia set the folder flat across her knees. 3 options. First, you sign the termination of life estate. The sale goes through. You negotiate whatever consideration Warren offers you, or we negotiate on your behalf, and you walk away with a portion of the proceeds. The house is gone, but you have resources and legal standing to establish yourself elsewhere. Second, you refuse to sign. You retain your life tenancy. You return to the house tonight or tomorrow, and you live there for as long as you choose. Warren cannot sell. He cannot mortgage it against your interest. He cannot remove you without a court process that he will not win. Third, you do nothing tonight. You wait. You let him find you. You listen to what he says before you say anything at all without a prepared script on either side. Then you decide. Miriam said 3. Delia said I thought so. They sat in a quiet that had the texture of 2 people who have arrived at the same conclusion by different routes and are simply confirming it between them. At 9:05, a car pulled up outside and stopped with the slightly uneven halt of someone who has been driving on adrenaline for the better part of an hour. Through the glass, Miriam could see Warren get out. His coat was open despite the cold. His hair was not the way he kept it. He looked like a man who had spent 45 minutes having an argument with himself and had not resolved it by the time he arrived. He stood outside the doors for a moment, looking in through the glass. Delia said quietly, I will stay right here. You speak to him first. When you want me, look back. Miriam nodded. She did not turn around. Warren came through the doors and stood at the entrance scanning the station the way people scan when they are frightened of not finding something. Then he saw her. He crossed the room at a pace that was faster than his usual walk, the stride of someone equal parts relieved and unprepared. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the navy coat. He looked at her face. He looked at the bag at her feet, the same thin canvas bag he had packed for her with the old clothes and the house slippers and the 3 days of blood pressure medication already pushed out of the blister pack. I came, he said. It was not an apology. It was not a question. It was the only honest sentence available to him at that moment, small and late and true. Miriam looked up at her son. She did not look up from a position of weakness. She had chosen this seat 7 hours ago, and she was still in it, and that was not nothing. I know, she said. A silence. Warren's eyes moved to the woman beside his mother, the briefcase, the folder, the coat. The way Delia Park was looking at him without expression, with the unhurried attention of someone who has reviewed 18 months of his paperwork and arrived at a complete and accurate opinion of it. He looked back at his mother. Mom. He said it carefully, the way you say a word when you are not sure what it will open. How long have you known? Miriam looked at him for a long moment, at the face she had watched since it was new, at the man he had become, at the gap between the two. Sit down, Warren, she said. And he did. Beat 6. The bench conversation duration. Safa Arts Min. Time stamp. Aris 0 Humphrey 9. 1. Entry hook. Bangoy. Ngoy Oy Trenchichke Godaitai. Union Station Miriam Warren Delia. Luke No. Kondritui Bengsegan Nuvang Nguoy, Jai, Lakwak, Trachuyan Mawaran, Jan Chuanbi, 18s, Thangchomot Fian Ban, Kua Nova Huan Tuan Hong, Juak, Chuanbi, Chofian Ban Jang Xera, Cho. Development, Rhythmic skeleton. Open waren ba jau voi giai thichkin doan ku khan no ngan hang up luk tai chin. Ong ta hong shin loi ve ben she. Ong ta giai thish vetien. Miriam nangha het. Hong nanga loi. Ki ong ta dung lai ba hoi mot kao kon nangha misik hong biet to giai nao min jang ki. Rhythm point Wayne Warren mitoing hi tutuk jo la jon gian hua thua ke Miriam kong fai kon he mi kong jotski ong ta kong tra loy mila kituan truong turnta autumnam Warren me jok moi to giai min kitunam 19th century 7 mot koang dang mi kong bao gyoki motugi ma kong biet nong hialagi. Rhythm point 2. Warren chuyan sang vai thi me ko the ki kong toy ko the jamba o me se juot joy. Shu tot me ko the o voi chung toy hoak chung toy. Tim mot noi tot hon Sunset Meadows. Miriam Warren. Ong tadang lai. Kun vua jua meraben shi voi. Mot kai tui dulich dollar store. Va hong ko jian thoe sak. Jo la kash kon. Jambao Misajuok Joy Sutot. Rhythm point 3. Lanjao Tien Trunkuok Trochuyen. Warren im lang vi kong ko kao traloy. Thai vei im lang vi jang tin toan. Ong tan hen shuang tai. Miriam en hinong taguang matkua kontraiba 52. Tuengoy tren gegoben shegiong. Nuong tan joyo ban bep hoi. Sepatoi kibifat. Vinoi doi. Ba, hong nois. Jiu jo, voi, ongta. No hung batay no. Rhythm point kwa Miriam, mesenoi chokombiet meselamgi. Hong fai, vi kon shung, jang biet ma vi mekong, mon kon lai sheven ha toi, nay makong, hieo ming, jang jung o jiao. Warren, nhin len, miseski, ong tan hetho. Nyung hong fai toi nai. Hong fai tronk ben she. Va hong fai hong so jiu kien. Rhythm point 5. Delia lera mo tai liu to cap settlement agreement ba jan soan san bathang truok chong ai nai. Ba jiu kien mot waren than tuan cho. Miriam mot kuan tuong juong 15%. Gia tri giao dich koang 418,000. John Hu compensation cho life estate rights ba tubo. Hai waren ki thusak na hanrang Miriam Khong ki bat ki giai to na makong hoan tuan hiu nui dong bao ve bakoy. Bat ki kiu nai venang luk papli trong tuong lai. Ba waren jua ba ven hatuay nai ba o laya en hajocho jen ki geo dish jong va batu sap sep noi o muy theo lech kwa ba. Close Warren Jock Settlement Agreement. Ong ta jot cham hong fai vi hong hiu, ma vi jang hiu, jai ju hon tung dong. Hi ong tan hin len mat, ong ta ko jiu, gicha hong fai tuk gian, hong fain hen hom. Ji gichogan, voisun hanra muon mang. Mishwan bijiu nai bao lau roi, Miriam banam. Ong ta vamevan kishokon, Miriam toy, sikisho bryce. Ong ta hong here. Kon kong ko kon try ten bryce. Miriam hin ongta. Jola ji memuan kon nki vetrenjuong venha. 3. Exit hook. Ongta jan hong. Hiu kau jon gai. Lutz jo. Ongta se hiu sao. Hoas ongta se kong. Bao gio hiu va gio. Jo kong noi len hiu thu. Miriam ja noi na hung. Giba kan noi kong, fai je ongta the, joi ma vi jo la sutataves sudat, sungjang juok noi radun goi, nge ko hiu hai hong. Bar jan hok jio jo tu howard ngoi, jan lap motto gyai, nam du tai nin shama kong sa biet hai, sao chi, biet rang jo la jio jung nen lam. What? Ki dialog ankor. Warren, mivan kicho con. Miriam, toise kisho Bryce. Warren con hong so con triten Bryce. Miriam hin ong ta jo la jiu memuon con nungi vetran juong ven ha. Seng. Retention device mid-beat miseki. Nung hong fai toi nai. Hong fai trong ben she. Miriam jiao and guok hoan toan kivong. Khan gia jan tu hoi ba ko ki hong shao traloi. Lakon hong theo geo kien kuaba sanda 6. Retention device and beat. Twise kisho Bryce va kau hoi kwai beat 6. Bryce la aya jai la ten bang hi. Rahe languoi that ko traloi gen o beat. 7.7. Visual scenes. Kan ha Warren kong. Ko koi traloi lan jiao tien tronkwok. Tro chuyen ong taim long hong 5 tin tuan. Kan be Delia le settlement agreement ta suan san batang truok chongai nai. Kusuk ki Warren handra bajan chuan bijio nai tu truok. Kan si Warren jok settlement agreement tren ke gobenikse an Jane Vang Guang Mat Suang Gui Jang Jots Va Hiu Tung Dong Mot. Ot. Concrete object moment settlement agreement. Tai lieu. Delia Soan Bathang Truok. Hong Fai Fong B. Hong Fai Life Estate Deed. Tai Liu Nai La Tuong Lai Hong Fai Kwa Hu. Miriam Hong Chibao Ve Min Ba Jan Chuan Bi Chobuok Tiep Theo. Sao Sinchin Chanins. Emotional memory. Misaki Nhung Theo Jiu Kien Kuame. Kangia Femsa 5 Pulis Bit Suitsman Kua Kao Jo. Hong Fai Tu Choi. Hong Fai Tra Thu. Suik Sas Nhan Hoan Tuan Kuai Mot Ngoi Biet Gia Trikwa Min Va Kong Chap Nhanit Hontha. Tense. Passing note. Jiu Va Ko Trong Luong. Jai La Kuok Tro Chuyen. Quan Trong Nhat Trong Kao Chuyen No Kan Kong. Gian Je Tho. Claude Moi Hoang Imlang. Trong Bit Ne Ko Ying Hia. Warren Imlang Vi-hong Ko Kao Traloi La. Kas Warren Imlang Vi Jang. Tin Tuan. Dung Van Soi Jefan Biet Hailoi Imlang Ja. 11. Word Count Target. Once sense once 2. CTA Threnkiers End of Beat 6:49. Vote. We're almost at the end of Miriam's story. If something here felt familiar, if you've ever held something quietly while waiting for the right moment, subscribe. More stories like this are coming. Friday came in cold and clear the way November sometimes does after a week of gray, as though the month had decided to show one honest morning before settling back into its usual mood. The light through the windows of Delia's conference room was thin and direct, falling across the table in a clean stripe that moved slowly as the morning progressed. Miriam arrived at 8:50. She hung her navy coat over the back of her chair and sat down. Delia set 2 cups of coffee on the table and did not comment on the fact that Miriam had slept in the house on Morrow Street the night before, in her own bed under her own roof, which was still her own roof until she chose otherwise. Warren arrived at 9:05. He came alone as she had asked. He looked like a man who had not slept well, which was accurate, and like a man who had done some thinking in the hours he had been awake, which was also accurate. He sat down across from his mother and nodded at Delia and put his hands flat on the table in the manner of someone who has decided to be straightforward and is arranging his body to support that decision. Delia walked them through the procedure without ceremony. Settlement agreement first. Warren read it through one final time, slowly, his eyes moving line by line. Miriam watched him read and thought that he had his father's habit of moving his lips slightly on complicated clauses, a thing Howard had done for 40 years and never once noticed about himself. Warren signed at the bottom of each page, dated the final line, and set the pen down. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway," Delia said. "Now for Mrs. Calloway's portion." Miriam reached into the inside pocket of her coat where it hung on the chair back. Her fingers found the envelope by shape the way they had found it every morning for 3 years. She drew it out and laid it on the table. In the conference room light it looked smaller than it had felt all this time. A pale yellow envelope, slightly worn at the edges, her own signature across the sealed flap in the careful hand she had used since secretarial school. She picked up Delia's letter opener and worked it along the seam, slowly following the line of the stitching she had made herself. She did not tear it. Some things you open the way they deserve to be opened. The document inside was 4 pages, tri-folded, stamped at the top right corner by the county recorder's office. March 14, 2011. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges in 13 years, but the type was clear, and the signatures at the bottom of the final page were exactly as they had been on the afternoon Howard and Miriam had sat in these same chairs and signed their names beside each other. Warren looked at his father's signature. He said nothing. He looked at it for a long time. Delia placed the termination of life estate beside the original deed. Miriam looked at Howard's signature once at the date at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon in 2011 that had produced something neither of them had known they would need. Then she looked at the line, waiting for her name. "I am signing this," she said, "because Howard signed that. He wanted the house to be mine. Now I am deciding what is best for me." She picked up the pen and signed her name in full the way she had signed 40,000 documents before it. Miriam Eleanor Calloway. She dated it and set the pen down. Delia notarized the signature. The document was complete. Miriam stood and lifted her coat from the chair. As she was putting it on, buttoning it from the bottom, the way she always did, Warren said, "Mom, last night, what you said about Bryce." "What did you mean?" She finished the top button. "Bryce Alderman," she said. "He lives on Morrow Street, 4 houses down. His father passed 2 years ago without a clear will. He was left with nothing from a house his family owned for 30 years because the estate paperwork was incomplete. I helped him work through the process. It took 14 months and some of my savings." Warren looked at her. "Mom, that money is mine," she said. "Your father never let me go without money of my own. That was a principle he kept from the day we married to the day he died." She settled the collar of the coat. "The $480,000 from the settlement agreement will be more than enough for the rest of my life, and for the people who actually need what is left over. You do not need to concern yourself with that." A pause. Warren said, "Are you not angry with me?" Miriam looked at her son across the conference table in the same room where Howard had once signed a document out of love and with no idea of its future importance. She looked at Warren the way you look at something you have already made peace with, not warmly, not coldly, but with the clarity that comes after a long decision has been made and carried out and is now finished. "Anger takes energy," she said. "I spent that energy on other things." Delia provided copies to both of them. Warren took his folder and stood. He looked as though he had more to say and could not find the shape of it. He said thank you, which was small and late and still worth saying. Then he left. Miriam placed her copy in her bag. The pale yellow envelope, now empty, lay on the table. She picked it up, folded it once along its original crease, and tucked it into the outside pocket of her bag. Delia watched her. "You are keeping it." "Howard touched it," Miriam said simply. She picked up her bag and walked out into the November morning 13 minutes before Dennis Hoare's deadline. The coat buttoned, the envelope empty and still carried, because some things you hold on to, not for what they contain, but for the hands that prepared them for you before they knew you would need them. The moving truck arrived at 9 on Saturday morning, 2 men who worked with the efficient quiet of people who understand that a house being emptied is not always a sad occasion and not always a happy one, and that their job is simply to carry things carefully from one place to another without adding to whatever the day already contains. Miriam let them work. She walked through the house, 14 steps on the staircase. She counted them one last time, her hand on the railing Howard had sanded and refinished in the summer of 2003, because she had mentioned once, only once, that it felt rough under her palm. She went through the upstairs rooms, the small one that had been Warren's, the bathroom with the window that had always let in too much cold in January, the bedroom where she had slept for 41 years, and where 2 mornings ago she had woken before dawn and lain in the dark and listened to the house settle around her the way old houses do, as though they know something is ending, and are marking it in their own language. Then she went downstairs and through the kitchen and opened the back door. The apple tree stood in the morning light exactly as it had always stood. The last of the leaves were down now, scattered across the grass in the particular way of November, and the branches were bare and clean against the gray sky. It had been planted the spring Warren turned 15, a Saturday project, Howard in his old work clothes, Warren sulking at being made to help, and then not sulking once the digging started. The tree did not know any of this. It simply stood where it had been put, and had done what trees do when they are put in good ground and given enough time. Miriam stood at the back door and looked at it for a while. Then she went back inside. Delia arrived at 10 with a folder of the final transfer documents and a thermos of coffee from the Good Place on 5th Street. They sat at the kitchen table while the moving men carried boxes past the doorway, and Delia poured 2 cups and set the thermos between them, and did not say anything about the fact that the kitchen was almost empty. Now the walls bare, the counter clear, only the burn mark near the window remaining, which no one had taken, and no one would take because it was not a thing you could take. "How do you feel?" Delia asked. Miriam held her cup and considered the question the way she considered all questions worth answering without rushing it. "Light," she said finally. "Not the way you feel when something is lost. The way you feel when something has been completed." Delia nodded. Miriam told her about Gordon then. The man at the station 2 seats down the newspaper folded open the 2 cups from the vending machine set on the bench without ceremony. The question he had asked and the answer she had given. For the phone to ring. Delia laughed. "A real one, small and unguarded, the kind that comes when something is both funny and exactly right. Mrs. Calloway," she said, "you are the steadiest person I have ever worked with." Miriam looked at her coffee. "I am not the steadiest," she said. "I am only the person who worried early alone for a long time before any of it was real. By the time it was real, there was nothing left to worry about." Delia looked at her for a moment. Then she opened the folder. By noon, the house was empty. The moving men shook hands at the door and drove away. Miriam stood in the living room alone in the space where the furniture had been for 4 decades. The floors were oak pale and worn, and in the places where the rugs had lain for 30 years, the wood was a shade darker, the surrounding floor having lightened gradually in the way wood does when light reaches it year after year. 41 years of a life made visible in the difference between oak that had been covered and oak that had not. She lowered herself to the floor slowly, the way you do at 76, with attention to each joint and a hand braced on the wall. She knelt and placed her palm flat against the wood. The floor was cool and solid and real in the way that floors are when you have finally put your hand on them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "To the house, to Howard, to 41 years." She stayed there for a moment. Then she stood. Delia was at the door. Miriam crossed the empty room and stopped in the hallway and put on her coat. She buttoned it from the bottom up the way she always had each button in order taking the time to do it properly. Inside the left pocket, the small calendar. Inside the right pocket, the pale yellow envelope empty, folded once along its original crease. The lining where she had stitched it for 3 years was smooth now, loose, the thread still visible in neat small rows. She ran her thumb across it once. Then she straightened the coat and walked out. Delia locked the door and handed the key to the agent waiting at the curb. Miriam stood on the front walk and looked at the house in the November light, the white paint and the dark shutters and the window of the bedroom where she had made every decision that mattered for 4 decades. The apple tree was behind the house, invisible from here, but she knew it was there. The family moving in next month had 3 young children. She hoped they would keep the tree. She hoped one of them would climb it in summer, would sit in the branches on a hot afternoon, and not think about anything in particular the way children sit in trees when they are lucky enough to have one. The tree did not know any of this. It only knew that November was finishing and spring would follow. Delia touched her arm gently. "Ready?" Miriam looked at the house one last time. She left in Howard's coat the calendar in the left pocket and the empty envelope in the right, walking toward a 2-bedroom apartment on the shore of Lake Erie, with a balcony that faced the water and a window that got enough morning light for a small clay pot. She had bought apple seeds before leaving, the kind Howard used to grow. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. She was a woman of 76 who had read every document she had ever signed and had prepared carefully for a long time and had come out the other side of something difficult with her name on her own terms and enough left over for the people who actually needed it. Loneliness is lighter than anger. She had learned that slowly and was still learning it. Lake Erie is very beautiful on a November morning. The apple tree stood in the yard of the house on Callaway Street, bare-branched, unhurried, indifferent to everything that had happened around it and because of it. Spring would come? That was all it needed to know. Thank you for staying with Miriam until the end. If her story touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the right moment. More stories like this are coming. Do not miss them.